Hello everyone, welcome to the next episode of Azure on Air. In today's episode, we have Sathish Veerapandian. So, as the audience know, we are running a series of podcasts based on the topic Azure Automation. So, initially in the last podcast, we had an intro about Satish. So, I would like to give an introduction of him now as well because we might have new audience in this podcast. And for the new audience, if you have not listened to the previous podcast, please tune into Azure On Air. It is available in our website as well as in Spotify. Make sure you listen to the previous episode and then get back to this to have a flow on it. So, Satish is a certified Microsoft infrastructure and cloud architect with a hands on 15 years of experience in planning, designing, execution, integration, operations, IT management. So he's also an Microsoft MVP and he's holding that for the 8 plus years. So in the last episode, we just spoke about Azure Automation, and there we had three types of tasks being mentioned by Satish, out of which update management was discussed in the last episode. In today's episode, we are planning to discuss with the audience regarding configuration management, where Satish will take it forward to explaining us what can be expected in this specific episode. Hi Satish.
Today we are going to talk about another one part, which is the configuration management. Onboard your VMs, which is running on the Azure, onboard VM or server, which is running in your data center. There is also a better way of doing that, which is from the Microsoft Azure. We have something called configuration management, which can be utilized from the Azure Automation account. This configuration management is tightly integrated with Azure Monitor, and all the logs are collected in the Azure Monitor. Hi, Amita, and hi, everyone. As it was explained by Amita in the previous episode, we talked about especially one topic, which is the update management that could be managed from the Azure Automation account. Today, we are going to talk about another one part, which is the configuration management. Like with this configuration management, we can do a lot. So we'll talk about what is configuration management. So with this configuration management, you can configure, let's say, like onboard your VMs, which is running on the Azure, onboard VM or server, which is running in your data center. This is something like, okay, so in the configuration management, basically we have three types of breakdowns. The first one is the inventory. So this inventory is something like you can talk about, okay, you're onboarding a server in your data center or an application in a data center, and it is not an admin job just to onboard and leave it, because you need to track that particular application or a server to make sure that it is running and it is operational, so that it can be utilized and it's always available. So in that case, in the on-premise, we usually depend on some kind of monitoring system, which can be a SCOM, so that all the services are reported to the SCOM, and then we track them. But there is also a better way of doing that, which is from the Microsoft Azure. We have something called configuration management, which can be utilized from the Azure Automation account. And creating this Azure Automation account is also very simple, as we talked about it in the previous podcast. All you need to do is just have one subscription, and in the subscription, you're going to create one automation account and then utilize them. So here, you just create one automation account, and then you have something called configuration management. And in the configuration management, you just go to the inventory. So in the inventory, what you're going to do is you have the opportunity to add the Azure VMs. You have the opportunity to add even a non-Azure machine, which could be a machine which is running in your data center. So a question might be coming from you: what is the benefit of doing that? Okay. So here the main benefit of doing that is you really no need to have one instance of a monitoring application which is running in your data center, because that is also an additional investment that is coming from your IT budget. Instead, like you can utilize one of the service which is present in Azure, and if you could compare the pricing factor of a monitoring solution which is running in your data center and a monitoring solution which could be managed from the cloud, and then adding the inventories just in few clicks, I would say This is definitely a cost effective. So that's the first thing. And the second part which I would like to tell is, like, the moment when you onboard a VM or any a server which is running a data center, it is going to report you, okay, what is the status, what software it is running, what are the files it is having, so what is the Windows registry it is having, what are the Windows services it is having. Okay, even there could be a question coming from the audience. Is that something I would be able to monitor only the Windows? No, even you can monitor the Linux. So even if you're onboarding a Linux VM or a Linux appliance, you would be able to see the Linux daemon status. So this is a combination of monitoring both platforms, Windows as well as Linux, which is really good. And the other interesting part is, like, you can do the change tracking. Like for example, you can configure a file tracking on Windows. So what is a file tracking? Like something, you can specify a particular file, and then let's say a host file which is running on your Windows or Windows server or Windows VM. You can see, okay, uh, every time you can check if that particular file is existing. If it doesn't exist, you can see it on the configuration management. Um, Also, you can do some tracking of the file content itself. It's not only about the file. Let's say if you want to track some file content, then you can also add the particular file content and see the file content changes. Or if someone is making a changes on that particular file content, you can also view the contents of the tracked file. So which is really good. You can go down to this particular level and see what is the changes of that particular file. And the other important thing which most of the admins would like to see is, okay, is there any registry changes that has been done? Yeah, you can also do track the registry keys option. So having the track registry keys gives you option to add a particular Windows registry key for change tracking. You can see, was there any particular changes done on that particular registry keys? That is also possible. And lastly, there is also something called searching the logs for changing the records. You can do various searches, because I would also like to tell one more thing. Because this change management, this configuration management is tightly integrated with Azure Monitor, and all the logs are collected in the Azure Monitor. So with that, what you can do is you can run the query, and it would show the most recent inventory records that has been added, or the Windows services that has been added into your VM. So all these things shows as the recent changes of the configuration that has been changed in your inventory. So which is really good. This is one of the best option I would talk about in the inventory. Uh, so in the inventory, basically, when you onboard a new software which is running on a VM or a machine which is running in your data center, it is going to simply report you how many machines you have on your inventory, what are the softwares that is running, so what is the files. If you want to track a specific Windows registry key, you can do that also, and also the status of the Windows services. So this is one of the best part about the inventory. And the next one is we are going to talk about is the change tracking. So here in the change tracking, you can do five types of changes. Like if there are any changes on your Windows services, it is going to tell you. If there are any changes in your software, it could also be directed. And if there is any changes on your registry, it can be directed. So the best part is, like, all these things are showing as a graphical events, when you go into Azure Automation account, when you create and onboard your VMs into this inventory. The best part is on the change tracking, it is going to show you as how many registry events that has been done on your particular VM or server. The same thing, what are the software changes that has been done, or what are the Windows services that has been stopped running, or any changes that has been done. It is going to show. So overall, in the configuration management, the first thing when you're going into the production is, like, you need to understand what you really need to track in your application, or what you really need to track in your server. That's the most important thing which you need to look at it. And the last part I would like to talk about is desired state configuration. So this desired state configuration is a feature in the Azure Automation account that will help the administrators to automate the configuration of Windows or a Linux operating system. This DSC provides a set of PowerShell language, extension, commandlets, and also a process called declarative scripting. Um, this desired state configuration uses something called VM agent framework, which is uh, used to deliver and report the configuration of your VM or a server which is running a data center. So only based on that, it is something called a DAC pull server. If you have worked in the past, there is something called DAC pull server. So it uses more or less the same concept. So with that, it will check the configuration document or particular script, what you are expecting on a particular VM or a server to see if it is running. So going further to talk about the desired state configuration, what you need to do is first in the desired state configuration, in reality, I can also tell you, I did one testing to see if the IIS service is running on uh, one of the Skype server, because of course Skype for Business server has the IIS running on it. So for that, it's very simple. You just need to go into the desired state configuration, and then you're going to create a simple script which is going to check if your particular server is running an IIS service. So just if a particular VM or a particular server is running IIS web server, so just you create a PowerShell script for this one. What we do is we just create one test configuration. The test configuration file can be of your own commandlet or a PowerShell script. So in that, what you're going to see is the moment when you onboard VM into this inventory, you're going to target that particular VM and see, okay, is this particular server having a web server on it? So if it is having a web server, it is going to say yes. Or even you can monitor something. I have a particular certificate authority server where I should not have any web server running on it. There is an accident. An admin can a new admin, a newly onboarded admin, accidentally he can deploy a web server on a certificate authority. So in those cases, like what you can do is just simply create a configuration file and say this particular server should not have a web server running on it. So it will frequently check. It is going to see if this particular server is running a web server. No, then it is going to report that particular status perfectly fine. And just in case if it is not reporting it to be properly as expected, then you would be able to see on the desired state configuration. One important thing I also wanted to tell is the best thing about the desired state configuration is the moment when you select the VMs and you're adding your the config file, it is going to list you the nodes, it is going to list you the status, and also it is going to list you like what are the ones which is in compliant and what are the ones which is in not compliant. So this will be giving you a overall dashboard, like a feel when an admin logs in into the automation account and he sees on his side, which is really good, right? And also another one additional thing which I would like to tell is, okay, as an admin, you have onboarded the inventory. In reality, you really wanted to know what configuration I wanted to look for my application. What you can do is there is something called gallery. In the gallery, you have a lot of a config file which is created and shared by the community. So here you can see there is a lot of thing to see. Okay, is the Windows having a IIS server config correctly done? And also you have something domain controller config that will demonstrate which is viable domain controller. So and also you have something for the DNS server config. So that module will say the like the PowerShell decide set configuration for configuring the DNS servers. So all these things are available already by the community contributors in the gallery. So I would suggest like simply go and onboard your VMs into the configuration management and then go into the state configuration. And in the state configuration, look for something which is coming into your used case. Like look for okay, I wanted to know what is the best configuration of the DNS server. I can look for something on the gallery and see, and you can later modify or even use them. So that is one of the best benefit of using the configuration management for your application. So going further, the best thing I would suggest is, like, first you can add your machines to the configuration management, and later you can do the change tracking. The change tracking is something very simple, which you can think of. Okay, there is a host file which is running on my Windows. I wanted to ensure that host file is not modified. You can also track that, and if there is particular registry which is very important, where no admins would need to change that by any mistake, you can simply select that and do the monitoring part, and also the change tracking for the Windows service. If there is any changes that is done on the Windows service, that can also be monitored here. So the first thing is adding the inventory and doing the change tracking would be very easier part. In reality, you can do this and monitor like one or two VMs, how it is, the difference, like how you could measure the difference from having a VM monitored on premise with the monitoring solution and doing it in this way. I would say this is definitely beneficial. You would see a lot of benefits, and management of this monitoring system is also easy. And later, after you get comfortable with this change tracking, you can simply go with the desired state configuration, where you can create your own configuration script and monitor your application. Let's say I don't want to have a web server running on this certificate authority. Just an example, something like that you can see, which would also list you the configuration status in the monitoring portal. So overall, I see the configuration management is really a good feature to be utilized in the automation accounts.
Amazing. So, Satish, that was a very wonderful explanation that you gave about how this configuration actually happens and what is the purpose of it. Yeah. So, followed by that, I just have a question for you now. Do we have any prerequisite for this specific action to perform?
Yeah, so that's a very good question, because when we talk about the prerequisite, we need to have the requirements, like what what you need to monitor, because that can be like a question coming from the management, like what is the difference you are seeing, or what you're going to do with this. So, like, you need to see like what is the current monitoring mechanism you're using in your on-premise solution, and then you need to understand, is that possible to monitor with this desired state configuration. And in the prerequisite, you need to be having the privileged admin account. I'm not sure about what is the exact permission that is required. That's You need to have the permission on your Azure subscription, and of course you need to have access to your Azure subscription to create this automation account, and then add this configuration to your VM. And at last, even for the network, you need to make sure that this particular, if you are doing it for the configuration on your data center, you need to make sure the network port is allowed to uh, reach the Azure services, because, as I said, it is doing a pull activity. So your data center needs to allow connectivity to the uh, Microsoft data centers for making this the service in the data center to report to the Microsoft Azure data centers. So the network part is also prerequisite, and also permissions is a prerequisite. And of course, at last, we need to have the Azure subscription to create this automation accounts.
Super. So that was also again a very crisp detail about what is required and what is not required for this specific task to be performed. So I think Satish, for this series, it was wonderful having you for this series again. And in the next, what can we expect in the next episode for the audience?
Yeah, okay. So in the next episode, what we're going to talk is the last part, which is the process automation, uh, with which you can do a lot. You can do the run books, the jobs, and the hybrid worker groups, and the watcher tasks. This is one of the interesting module which we would talk about. where you can do a lot of automations through this automation account. Like for example, onboarding a user, creating a user account, disabling a user account, all these kind of things you can do from the process automation, which we'll talk about in the next upcoming last series of this topic.
We are excited to know more about that as well, Satish. So thanks for your time. It was an insightful session, and we're looking forward for the next session as well.
Cove.co.